our first segment here, talking about the biggest storylines for the second half of the NBA season. Obviously, the NBA itself is a league that, as much as I enjoy basketball itself, there has been, and it's funny because this is a little bit of a microcosm of all that went on with JJ Redick in his past couple days talking about the NBA. It's about the basketball first, but the NBA, more so than any other professional league in America, is a little bit of a soap opera, and the storylines surrounding the league are always a massive part of the entire picture of the league itself. Sorry. So we are going to be talking about the biggest storylines. I think that it starts with, sort of on that same note about JJ Redick in the past couple days, talking about the Milwaukee Bucks and whether or not Doc Rivers is going to be able to turn it around, which I think, baseline off of how they've started during his tenure, they will turn it around some, but how much can he fully get the Bucks going and get them towards contention? We've been talking about it for weeks. It has been a rough start since Doc Rivers has taken over with the Milwaukee Bucks. They are 3-7. Their offense has fallen off of a cliff, as they were one of the best offenses in the NBA, and that has seen a drastic dip since then. And it hasn't all been negative, I think, because the defense has risen up about to the mediocre. They sit at 18th in defensive efficiency, which definitely isn't great, but you also look at where they were headed into this stretch under Doc Rivers. They were miserable. I still think they need to figure out, and again, figure out is sort of interesting because a lot of it does seem to be effort. Now, there are schematic factors that come into play, but their transition defense has been horrendous up to this point, and their effort levels at times as well have not seemed to be very good. So I think that that's something that the Bucks have to figure out down the second half of the season before we actually enter the playoffs, and they have to game in, game out, match up against the other best teams in the conference. Because if you look back to when Adrian Griffin was running the Bucks, it was pretty clear that, I think, if you get a Damian Lillard hot scoring night, they were going to be hard to beat. But when you looked at the idea of them going into a 7-game series against, again, these top competitors in their conference, they were going to need to solely rely on the offense to carry them through the series. Now, I know that they haven't been winning games the same, and there have been a couple ugly ones in this stretch, but I think that they are sort of starting to shift their identity a little bit towards having more of a presence on that defensive end, which is a crucial part for them. They got the All-Star break, which, yes, ended at a bit of a low as it could get, losing to the Memphis Grizzlies right before the break, but they have had the opportunity to sort of take a step back, take a deep breath, and reevaluate their situation. They go into this second half of the season still as the 3 seed in their conference. So it's not like, yes, it has been a rough stretch for them, but it's not like they are, even fighting for a playoff spot. They're a lock to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of what kind of team are they going to be when they get there. We will find out. Another storyline here, LeBron and the Lakers. Yes, I know it's a little bit redundant. It's always LeBron, it's always the Lakers. But I think that I am specifically interested in the fact that this is the first time that we've seen LeBron James have a potential out in his contract since he's been with the Lakers. Now, we've also talked about the fact that he has a $50 million player option after this year, and I think that at the age he's at right now, it is pretty unlikely that he would decline it. But you also have to keep in mind this is LeBron James. Yes, he obviously wants to maximize the amount of money that he can make, but I think that if he truly is unhappy in the situation, and it stems, especially again at 39 years old, it stems further than just the basketball. If he likes being in LA, in California, which it seems like he has, his son currently plays for USC, so I'm sure that plays a factor in whether or not Bronny is going to want to try and make the jump to the NBA next year. There are other factors, and $50 million is a ton of money to pass up on, but I don't think we can fully rule out the idea if this season plays out and he is miserable that he would want to just come back. Now, the Lakers are currently the 9 seed. They're 30-26. They decided to stay put at the deadline, as we know, other than signing Spencer Dinwiddie to a contract after he was bought out. So, obviously, no massive moves. Dinwiddie's a nice pickup, but he's not someone that really transforms your expectations for the Lakers, I think, going forward. It falls a lot on the laps of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, as it always has. And LeBron James, we know the level of play that he can elevate his game to when the moment calls for it. We saw it in the play-in tournament this year. We saw it in the playoffs last year, that when he is fully dialed in, can he give necessarily the longevity and the 37, 38 minutes of 100% effort that we saw specifically, those Miami years, the second stint in Cleveland, and obviously when he was younger too. But I'm talking about as far as when he was on those true championship contenders, making the finals and such, and actually had a real chance. I think that those years are behind him, but he can still definitely take it to a level when he needs to. I still don't see them as a real contender. I just have doubts about the rest of the team. Now, we're playing good going into the break. We were getting a terrific version of D'Angelo Russell. Austin Reeves, after starting off the year really struggling, he is sort of taking his game up towards another level, starting to be more of the consistent factor that he was last year during their playoff run. And when you look at their playoff run last year, I definitely don't want to diminish what they did, but I think that in the NBA, we've seen plenty of conference finals runs that are sort of a flash in the pan, and the Lakers obviously won the finals in 2020 with a lot of a different core, but with the same centerpieces in LeBron and in Anthony Davis. So you can't fully call it a flash in the pan from that sense, but they were the 7 seed after really struggling during the year, and they ran into a 2-seeded Memphis Grizzlies that is very young and was without their starting center. So they were playing Xavier Tillman, a solid player, but he was playing over 30 minutes per game. That is not really something that you see from a legitimate 2 seed. And again, legitimate, I'm not trying to diminish the Grizzlies run last year either, but it was that, and it was a Warriors team that was older, and again, not really a lot of size there. So last year was last year. We're moving on to this year, and I just don't know if I really see it with them this season. Now, they're going to have more assets to move going forward here, so they possibly can sort of right this ship in the offseason. But the way that this year plays out, I think, is going to be very crucial for whether or not LeBron James wants to stay with the team, especially after putting out all these feelers to the team that he wanted things to change. And this was the first time we really saw a LeBron James team, the front office that is, say, no, we are not going to fully cave into whatever you want. So I think that's going to be interesting to look forward to. Joel Embiid's timeline is something, because if you look at the state of the Eastern Conference right now, for what was expected to be a better season, I think, for the conference as a whole, we've seen with the Bucks and with Embiid's injury to the 76ers, the true high-level contenders sort of dip off a little bit with the with the state of the Eastern Conference. And that being said, if Joel Embiid were to play, there would be a very real opportunity for them to make some sort of a run. Still yet to go to the conference finals. We could see that change, but of course we have this whole situation with Joel Embiid. I think the fact that they made the Buddy Hield move this year, who he's an expiring contract, I expect that they are going to try and bring him back for next season. But I think that move said they are expecting him to be back of some capacity. Now, I wouldn't rush him if I were them because of the history that you've had with him and injuries in the past already. But it seems like they are at least mentally gearing up for trying to make a playoff run here. They're going to get D'Anthony Melton back, which I think is huge. I think he's a wildly underrated player in the NBA who's been dealing with an injury for the past month or so. So that will be an addition for them there. And then I think when you just look at the 76ers here, the key for them is to stay above the 7 seed and the play-in threshold, because especially in those, one-game opportunities, granted, if you have Joel Embiid, healthy or not, that probably determines the future of your playoff run as it is. But I think that, you don't want to sort of flirt with that play-in tournament. They're currently the 5 seed. They're 2.5 games above the 7-seeded Heat. So we will see, because they have been staggering, even a little bit prior to Embiid's injury, where he was missing some games. Tyrese Maxey was missing some games. So they haven't been playing their best basketball, but I do think that the Eastern Conference is pretty open if they were to get the best version of the current team that they have on paper. Next, I have the LA Clippers, where we've seen them sort of be a little bit of a cursed franchise for a lot of their existence, even predating when I was watching basketball. They had the worst win percentage in all of American sports from 1981 to 2014. And then they came into these years with Lob City, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and they were fun, but also had this little bit of a plague with the situation behind the scenes with their owner, Donald Sterling, and the recordings of him being racist, telling his wife, girlfriend, whatever it was, to not bring black people to the game. And, it was just a disgusting story that took place on a team that was, at the time, very fun and, very marketable. And then you have the owner in the back who is just, nobody wants to associate with that. So he ends up being forced to sell the team. And even then, obviously, you cleanse your organization of the true, toxic ownership, but there still wasn't great vibes, for lack of a better term, within the locker room itself. It's been reported that Chris Paul was very hesitant to give the reins over to an up-and-coming Blake Griffin. He didn't like that Blake was being marketed as their star, and I just feel like they kind of hurt themselves, blow a 3-1 lead during those years, and despite being a regular playoff team, never even made the conference finals. Would have if it were not for that blown 3-1 lead. And then obviously we come into this next era where they sort of rejuvenate themselves and, buy into this new nucleus of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and we just haven't seen them be healthy together up to this point. And it's unfortunate because we know the high level of talent they possibly could have with one another, but we just haven't reached the surface yet. They made a conference finals, at least, unlike the Lob City teams, but it was Kawhi Leonard who got injured during that series, and Paul George was incredible against Utah going into the conference finals against the Suns, but they were just undermanned at that point. So they would love to finally get over this get this monkey off of their back. They're moving into a new arena next year. I'm sure that Steve Ballmer, their new owner, would love to be able to enter with a bang and a flash and sort of take over to whatever extent the Clippers are ever going to be able to take over LA and start this new era off for them on a positive note. And then sort of on that same note of finally being able to get the job done, the Boston Celtics, who have been another team that's been at the top of the standings for the past handful of years, and we saw the transformation when they sort of switched over the reins. They were this fun up-and-coming underdog led by Isaiah Thomas and with, a group of very solid role players, but not true star power, and then were able to add Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown to that mix, and since then they have been to 4 Eastern Conference Finals and a finals appearance. So we've talked so much about this core, and while I do think the general discussion around the Celtics has been a little bit overcritical, given that they were a younger team and they were still sort of finding themselves, and because you're the Boston Celtics, because you've been in the moment as many times as they have been, they were expected to win already, and because they haven't done that, they've been looked at a little bit as failures to people on the outside. This is their best opportunity yet with adding Drew Holiday, with adding Kristaps Porzingis, and they are the odds-on favorite going forward. And Jason Tatum talked about the idea of becoming the next face of the league, and him and some of his other peers at All-Star Weekend talked about the fact that starts with winning, and Tatum and the Celtics have a golden opportunity to do so this season. On that note of the next face of the league, we are going to be taking our first break, and when we come back on the other side, we will be discussing who could be the next face of the NBA, as that was a big topic of discussion at All-Star Weekend this past week. So stick with us. We will be right back and get into all of that.